The economy looked like it was growing well in the first quarter. Originally we had a 3.2 number. It's been revised down to 3.1. We get the final number later this week. It's likely to stay at least 3%. But the issue is not the first quarter. It's really the quarter that we're in. The economy is clearly decelerating, but also in a period of volatility that is largely being impacted by the global situation and global slowdown, and of course the trade disputes that are happening, with everybody really over-focused on China right now, but in reality we still have some lingering big question marks hanging over the automotive market that we'll talk about later. The really positive part, the green light, we have to give to the employment sector, because the unemployment rate is at a 49-year low at 3.6%, but that too is looking like that light could change any second to yellow. It's like if I can see the pedestrian numbers counting down in the corner of my eye, and I want to get in that intersection before it turns yellow. And it's because we had only 75,000 jobs created in May. We'll get the June numbers at the end of next week. If we see a repeat of that, it's absolutely a story that businesses are starting to slow down hiring, but more importantly, we're starting to see certain sectors of the economy losing jobs. Retail and a few portions of the economy were mainly in that category in May, but it's increasingly looking like manufacturing, and of course manufacturing related to the automotive market will be a part of that too. The third item, really, we don't have Michigan sentiment data until Friday, so we're keeping it green in terms of the high number. But as I mentioned, yesterday's consumer confidence data does not bode well for the Michigan number staying high. Yesterday saw a decline in the Conference Board's consumer index by more than 7%, equaling the extent of decline in December, when we had a government shutdown and we had a massive stock market sell-off. And it's clearly the consumer is saying that present conditions have deteriorated, as well as being anxious about the future. And it's really the first time we've seen that confluence of the consumer saying things are bad right now, and also saying that they're likely to be worse in the future. And most notably, we've had a really interesting roller coaster ride on the subcomponent where consumers are reporting plans to purchase a vehicle. In May, it was literally the highest number in the history of the survey, and it fell massively in June, which seems to resonate with what we're hearing with dealers on how new vehicle sales were in May relative to June. And I won't steal from Charlie and Michelle when we get to that later. Earnings growth is clearly slowing down, and what I really focus more on is if you compare this to the position that the consumer was in last year, which was why we had such a strong quarter. Effectively, all of the earnings growth last year ended up in people's pocketbooks, and then they spent it, because the effect of implementing lower tax rates literally meant that all of the increase in income that any of us enjoyed had lower taxes, and the net result was essentially you got all of it to be able to spend, and consumers did. This year, the wage growth is not as strong, and taxes are set, and the effect is essentially that nowhere near the same amount of money is ending up as disposable income. And so to me, that's one of the important yellow indicators. And then I reserved an additional slide to just talk about the confluence of interesting trends that are really complicated, especially when we look at the automotive market for credit and interest rates. So more broadly, credit availability, if you look at loan origination in the auto sector alone, it is still growing, and so it generally is a strong indicator that there's plenty of credit available. However, it is slowing down its growth. Some of that's related to the slowdown in the growth of retail new vehicle sales, but it's also changing in the composition, and most notably, we're seeing a substantial decline in financing of new vehicles. It's really leasing that is growing and supporting the retail new vehicle market, and the rest of the growth is coming from the used car financing, continuing to grow pretty dramatically. Now, interest rates, we're in this interesting cycle with Wall Street when every bad data point becomes good news to cheer because the Fed's going to cut rates. And so the view of what the Fed's going to do now is a near certainty. the futures market has a near 100% probability of a 25 basis point rate cut at the end of July. July 31st is the announcement of that meeting. But what's most fascinating about that is that there are literally odds that are positive for 4 rate cuts between now and the end of the year, according to the futures market. I think Charlie and I both share the opinion that the stock market is a little too aggressive and optimistic about that view. And so if it turns out to be clearly not the case, then a lot of the positivity in the stock market lately is going to be pulled out. But the point that I've been trying to make consistently is if you look at what consumers are actually paying for the auto loan rates that are being made today on auto loans, they are not getting the benefit of the rate declines that even the mortgage market has been seeing. Month to date in June, we've seen an increase in auto loan rates across the board. We've seen a little bit of a decline in May, but it was principally in people with prime and super prime credit that were having access to some kind of temporary low or zero APR offers on the new financing side. That decline seems to have reversed itself so far in June. Now, the way the new vehicle market works, we could have more of those offers made here in the last week of the month to drive sales. And so we always have to be cautious about the month-to-date number, especially in the new vehicle market. But what startled me the most was the subprime rate as of last week in dealer track for new vehicle finance was just shy of 18%, 17.93%, up about 150 basis points from this time last year. And you do the math on what the average new vehicle with an assumed 10% down payment, and that's nearly an $800 monthly payment. It just doesn't work for consumers, and to me that's the clear message. And why is that the case? Why can market rates be going down and mortgage rates be going down but auto loan rates going up? It's risk aversion. It's the lenders are absolutely concerned about the performance of those loans going forward, some of which is based on the aggressiveness last year now leading to higher delinquencies in subprime. But in general, there is absolutely a risk aversion, especially with higher short-term rates. Why would an investor take risk that they're not being compensated for? And then finally, gasoline prices were looking very scary for a few months, but just like last year, we seem to have hit a peak in May, and they are now year over year still slightly better than last year. However, we've got these big wild cards with the Middle East, as well as even the refinery fire in Philadelphia. And now it was announced this morning that they may be closing that permanently, which will cause some gasoline challenges in the Northeast. So I wouldn't put out gas being a story for the consumer, but at least right now that part of the consumer story is not a negative one. So